let I'll let Anna introduce it in a minute, but they had a great win with HarperCollins as well. So Anna, will you please tell us, introduce yourself firstly, because this is something you do just as a passion project, isn't it? So please introduce yourself, and we'd love to know how you got around to starting the Asian Leadership Collective.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining on a Wednesday. Yeah, my name is Anna Chan. I'm the founder and director of Asian Leadership Collective, and we're a social enterprise business, and we focus on increasing East and Southeast Asian leadership, people within their workplaces. So that means championing them on an ongoing basis. In terms of the programming and efforts that we do see already embedded in a lot of organizations, making sure that this group of people and community are also included in that. And basically, the crucial part of our work is to bridge that gap between East and Southeast Asian people with their workplaces, alongside, allies, sponsors, mentorships, and resources that we see being available, but aren't always inclusive of maybe this group as well. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit later today as well, in terms of access to resources and things like that. So yeah, and like you said, we worked across a number of different sectors. So publishing, a lot to do with food, because we will be talking a bit more about East and Southeast Asian Eats, so ESEA Eats, which is a campaign that we host every November. And we've had a couple of things happen already this month that I'm excited to share more about.
So let's talk a little bit more about that, Anna. How or where did the idea for ESEA Eats come from? Because obviously that's a part of what you do, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in terms of the idea, it was like the basic wants for better representation in food, culture and heritage of East and Southeast Asian people. And actually ESEA Eats came from a specific incident that I'm going to talk about that happened 2 years ago now, in terms of a contestant from MasterChef who cooked East and Southeast Asian food, called it dirty and needed refining. And yeah, that really didn't sit well with the East and Southeast Asian community, especially at a time where we were in the pandemic as well. So that this was maybe the first year of kind of lockdown, going in and out of lockdown, the increase of anti-Asian hate as well all over the world. And as you can imagine, on social media, a lot of people did get very angry, were very vocal as well, in terms of calling out this person as opposed to calling them in. And it just got very messy. And in terms of myself and Georgie Ma, who's an award-winning podcaster, we're really good friends, and we just had a conversation with each other and said, oh, don't want to do this anymore, in terms of feeling...
free rate sheet. You're going to go to photographyschool.com/rate sheet. It's going to look like this. That's Wordle.
So yeah, in terms of, we don't want to perpetuate this kind of negative feelings and cancelling someone over a discussion that needed to be had. So instead of doing that, we came up with a hashtag. I actually said to Georgie, let's start a rally people together, and she was like, you mean go to like Trafalgar Square in London with like placards and things? I was like, no, just like, get people to tell their stories. Why is someone else telling our story in a negative light? Let's, drown that out with positive things and share from our own experiences. So that's what we've done in terms of that sharing, that hashtag. It started from zero. I don't know if there's someone else.
Great. Is that Norman? Is that your you're on unmute? Okay, that's better. Yeah, keep going. Sorry, Anna.
That's okay. And so that hashtag went from 0 to nearly 12K in terms of usage now, and that's from people from chefs, small businesses, foodies, influencers, home cooks. So it is a real mix of people, and yeah, it's basically to champion our community and tell our stories in a way that is actually authentic and is respected as well in terms of that.
And that's predominantly on Instagram, isn't it? When you say the hashtag, and it's every November, is it? That's the kind of month that you celebrate this, which is why we sort of planned it.
Yeah, exactly. So the anniversary day is the 30th of November, but as you might know and appreciate, lots of events happening in November. So we've extended that out into the whole month. So we've had supper clubs, we've got our flagship event at Salesforce, which is a big tech company, next week as well, to champion, those stories and those leaders within our communities as well. So it's been really great to see it from a hashtag on Instagram being covered by certain food outlets, for example, to actually supporting small businesses that are doing food within this community, and also the leaders as well and business owners.
Fantastic. So here's the challenge: is everyone loves the flavors of ESEA, don't they? So I'm from India, and we love it. We combine soy sauce with tomato ketchup and green chilies. Okay, don't even ask me what that is, but it's Indo-Chinese as a thing. It's making my mouth water. It's always really hard to talk about food just before dinner. And there is a lot of interest in it. You see a lot of Indian chefs, for instance, really butchering recipes from ESEA, but we love the flavors and we love playing with the ingredients. And what are some of the particular challenges when working with the ingredients and the recipes of ESEA that you come across? And my personal favorite is the Asian salad dressing. Which, if you think about what is Asia, you're talking 49 countries, all bottled up into one little oil. You could splash over some leaves. So, tell me what your thoughts are on that.
There's a couple of things to that. I would say, in terms of a monolith as well. So the reason why I'm British born Chinese, but the reason why we use the identifier of East and Southeast Asian, or ESEA, is because we don't want to associate everybody being under this monolith of, especially East Asian communities, so Chinese, Japanese, for example, that maybe are more predominant and represented in the food industry, for example. But yeah, that monolith, it doesn't help, in terms of like the census or how we collect data, the little tick boxes, you're either Chinese or Asian other. But yeah, in terms of that as well, that relates to food in terms of taking the easy way out and being like, oh, well, that's just grouped under Chinese or just Asian in terms of that. So, and what we see sometimes is that, yeah, little bits of ingredients are used, or the language that we use around that is not helpful either. And the reason, for doing that, I guess, is, to be accessible, you want to be playful as well, but sometimes that does ear into the more harmful stereotypes. So when you get into quite gimmicky advertising, for example, or the rhyming of names that are actually quite sensitive, and people have been bullied in the workplace, or when they were growing up, in terms of that as well, it can be quite damaging. So I did a little poll actually in terms of some of the myth busting on the Asian Leadership Collective Instagram.
Yes,
on
please.
Our followers.
We're all over this. And also Norman isn't with us for very long. So when you've given us some examples, I'd love him to chip in as well, if he's got any thoughts and ideas. Is he on a train though? I think he might be on a train. He is. Okay, when you're ready, unmute yourself. Yes, Anna, give us some examples.
So myth busting, that everything that has soy sauce is Asian, that Asian food is dirty. We've mentioned that. Chinese food is always deep fried. MSG is a big one in terms of, giving headaches or being really bad for you. That all East and Southeast Asian food is eaten with chopsticks. Again, that's leaning more towards the East Asian kind of communities that use chopsticks, and other places actually communities will use forks and spoons, for example. And then, yeah, a trigger warning as well for others that might be watching this later on is, horrible things such as like eating dog, for example, being associated with dirty foods and exotic, weird foods like that, and the smells related to that as well. So things around lunch boxes when you're at school being told that you really smell, and it's actually quite traumatizing for a lot of people. And you know, certain stories, children's stories, for example, do perpetuate some of these things as well. So yeah, there's some things that people have shared.
And there is lots of nuances as well, aren't there? Like, for instance, chopstick.
I've got it going now, but only on here, not on there.
Chopsticks is another one, isn't it? Where apparently if you have them upright, have you, that's not a very positive sign, is it? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that for food styling purposes?
Yeah, the food styling as well, in terms of chopsticks being stuck in the bowl, is actually very symbolic for, I think, more East Asian. I know in Chinese culture, they do that for ancestral prayer. So that is actually quite a sacred thing, and you wouldn't do that in the home. It's actually considered bad luck as well. So we've seen that, putting lucky red packets that you see for Lunar New Year, for example, just put them on the table because it looks nice, and putting bowls on that. You wouldn't do that either. Actually, in my home when I was growing up, we put newspaper on the on the table. It doesn't look as you know,
does not look as good, yes.
Lovely, but that's the true thing. But yeah, in terms of some of the styling, it can be quite done for beauty purposes, the aesthetics, as opposed to actually leaning true into how yeah, those cultures celebrate and present their food.
Sure. Chef Norman, I see you're off a train now. Did you want to chip in? What do you make of some of this? What are some of the challenges with working with the food of ESEA? Oh, he's mute though. You're mute. You're mute. Can't hear you.
Can you unmute yourself, Norman?
Okay, there you go.
That's better. That's
Hear me
better.
now?
Yeah, now that's good.
I'm so sorry. I do apologize because I'm rushing to early birthday celebration, so I'm gonna get drunk later. So no one is supposed to know that. But anyway, so I'm gonna share with you the true, the true struggle about this Southeast Asian is the definition, like where actually the cuisine comes from. You see, because like when we're trying to choose a title for my new book, A Bowlful, we're trying to kind of decide whether we want to put Southeast Asian or we want to name all the countries actually in Southeast Asia, because people still struggle geographically, like to know like what actually is Southeast Asia, you see. So I mean, some people, well, those who've been to the to that Far East, I mean, would know like Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and all that. So covers like Southeast Asia. So when it comes to the dip dressing, right? So we have all this rice vinegar, fish sauce, shrimp paste, for example, everything like, you know, beautiful ingredients that can make a beautiful Asian dressing. So yeah, sorry, I'm trying to speak at the same time walking as well. Anyway.
That's
So,
okay. And so what's the correct way to do it? Is it because your book name obviously circumvents some of that, because you've gone for Bowlful, which is really lovely and kind of, you know, immediately it evokes something without being completely specific. So it's very clever with the way you've done it, and the recipes are fantastic. I've cooked from it and I highly recommend it. But, you know, is there a danger that sometimes we can be too reductive, you know, either like saying Asian just squishes everything into nothing. And you know, in some cases where it's possible, it's better to be specific. And where it isn't possible, then maybe you use a slightly broader term.
I mean, there's always like a massive competition, like amongst all these countries, especially from Asia. When you define Asia, it's like a lot like beautiful cuisine from. If you compare, like for example, like Vietnamese food and Thai food, for example, like a complete like a different take of like the ingredients that they use, you see, in the dishes. And the same thing again with Burmese food, food from Myanmar, just included a few from Maureen's you know, recipes and all that. So it's just for me, just like I wish there's like events. Well, what Anna's doing now is great, and then hopefully one day we can put this into reality, like create like a massive food festival combining all these countries. Like, can you imagine if you do this like in Trafalgar Square, have all these countries in Southeast Asia just to have like a food definition of Southeast Asia. I think that could happen one day. How about that? Yeah. So that could be like a
Thank you
nice
so
celebration.
much.
Maybe in November. Yeah. So November next year. I'm up for it. Why
See,
not?
that's it.
Amazing.
Norman, now he's got his written guarantee. There you go. Thank you so much, Chef, and enjoy
Okay.
the rest of the evening. Enjoy your birthday celebrations. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Okay,
Yes.
bye.
Bye. I guess this is where the conversation starts, doesn't it? Because Anna, he makes a really important point, is that sometimes you're just leading with the ingredients, and so it's easy to just club them together. But actually, when you consider all those, so Asia is, yes, 48, 49 countries, parts of Russia are also in Asia. And so, if you think about that, it suddenly starts getting very intricate. And all of those countries have their own food cultures, their own food heritage, dips, techniques. And it's quite hard to bring all of that in together, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even when I say the identifier of East and Southeast Asian, it's not perfect. It's a start to having these conversations, because we want to progress as opposed to, being reduced to just Chinese or other Asian. So yeah, I'd be totally up for that festival as well. Just putting out there.
We're all in there. We're all coming to meet, basically. I'm sure they're at the Guild. We'd love that. There are some, of course, it's always easy to be negative, but there are some people who do this really well, when you especially think about food writers, and of course, Fuchsia Dunlop comes to mind straight away. My favorite story about her is that Chinese restaurateurs actually invite her to consult, I believe, is what I've heard. I may be wrong, but that's what I've heard. And her books have been translated into Chinese, which is incredible. I think she used to be the BBC China correspondent. But are there some particular people that you'd like to, share with us, and just so we can follow their work and be inspired by them?
Yeah, I think in terms of this as well, I know I kind of think of it as a sliding scale of, we can always, it's good, but there's always like room for improvement, and it does depend on what you're looking for as well. Because, for example, Fuchsia, she's really great at championing Chinese food. I've seen her speak at exhibitions as well. But yeah, there's always rooms for improvement. So I guess in terms of writers, Angela Hoy is someone who talks a lot about the different types of food, and also she's had a book out recently called Takeaway, and she's a takeaway kid like myself, but she was brought up in Wales, in the valleys, growing up there, and her experiences. But there's loads of different other restaurants as well, and other organizations that I think do a pretty good job. So Le Pet is one I think Norman mentioned, in terms of Burmese kind of food. They showcase the food really well, and they're actually doing it in a very large scale way as well. They've got 2 restaurants in London. That's where we actually had our first supper club in London as well. And obviously they champion the food there, but also around the political and social incidents that are happening within Myanmar as well as a country. They do showcase a lot of artists there within the buildings and establishments. So they're one good example. They're actually owned, I think, by a Burmese owner, and the chef is Burmese as well. Tofu vegan in Angel is really great as well. Everything's made is vegan friendly. So it's either tofu or vegetables or mushrooms, but they don't compromise on the flavor or the textures as well, which I think is incredible. Lots of Sichuan kind of flavors in there as well, so definitely would recommend that. And I believe they are also East Asian owned as well. So some examples that aren't, M&S we did work with as well on their Lunar New Year campaigns, because as you know, they're on the high street. They celebrate Lunar New Year, and they bring out special products as well in their range. And that was a it was based off of, they did have a Chinese New Year celebration, but they started talking about other ingredients that came from Vietnam, for example, and it just didn't really make sense in terms of, you know, using Chinese New Year as a language and then saying that the ingredients were from a different place. So we had those conversations, and they were able to take their campaign to the next level. So again, being more inclusive, because in Lunar New Year includes other countries that celebrate that festival as well. It's not just China that celebrates, and in terms of their offerings as well, they've been really intentional with their language, their press release, their newsletters, and yeah, we were able to have a conversation, and a good conversation, in terms of what was harmful in terms of some of their languages and how they changed that as well. So I thought that was a really great journey that they went on. Kaleido is another example. They use language such as inspired by Vietnamese, because they do like summer rolls, and they put different ingredients in there, and it's quite a range in terms of the ingredients that they use, but they do use the language of inspired from Vietnamese cuisine as well. So
It's lovely.
yeah.
And that's kind of the difference. It's subtle, but it's important, isn't it? It's Vietnamese style versus as opposed to Vietnamese, or, you know, Vietnamese inspired by Vietnamese cuisine, which doesn't quite slip off the tip of the tongue, but it is possibly more accurate than just calling it Vietnamese and leaving it at that. And it's lovely to hear so many people are doing it. I'm going to add Jenny Lau to the mix. I really enjoy her work on Instagram as well, and she tends to cover lots of different things, but her writing is very on point. I think she should get a book deal. There we go. I've gone public to say that. But again, I've learned a lot from her. So, and Angela Hoy, it's important. I didn't know that's how you pronounce her surname, but it's Hui, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
But it's pronounced Hoy. So there you go. I learned something new again there. And that's lovely to hear. And I suppose the whole point of November and ESEA Eats is that we support and we champion and we learn a bit more about the food from those different nations. And be better ourselves. This is part of a wider movement. You want to tell us what's happening? So this year it's the human stories, isn't it? That's what you're doing. You're showcasing people, platforming people.
Yep. So yeah, this year the overarching theme for the first year was, are you team rice or team noodles? Because that's a really dividing thing in our community. So would love to hear what team you're on. But yeah, this year we decided that the humans behind the hashtag, we should be telling their stories again, all about the storytelling, but listening to what they, you know, see in terms of their own food, their own culture as well, and bringing that to the forefront. So we've been sharing different profiles on our Instagram Instagram grid, and then we've also been showcasing our volunteers as well, because a lot of the campaigning for November is done by volunteers. And so yeah, it's all about showing that people can lead. They don't need to have fancy job titles, but obviously sometimes that helps. You know, that they can tell their stories in an authentic way and make a difference in terms of different movements, and be able to, yeah, make a change in their workplaces as well.
Fantastic. Any tips and suggestions for how we might get involved? What can the Guild of Food Writers do? I mean, not just this November, but obviously in advance of next year, now that we hopefully understand a bit better. And that's going to be my last question before we open up. What we'll do is we'll stop recording. So it's a private session for us. And then we can maybe have more of a chat with everyone chipping in and asking questions. So yes, what more can we do as food writers?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, an easy lift would be to follow the hashtag on Instagram. In terms of that, getting to, you know, scroll through the different sharing of other people as well. There's a lot of engaged people on there sharing their food, their stories. And this is where you'll find the people that maybe you don't see those stories being told on a wider platform, and platforming those people as well in terms of that. So yeah, following on Instagram. And yeah, in terms of our work as well, we do a lot of work in terms of subject matter expertise. Like I say, we've worked with high street retailers like M&S as well on campaigns around food as well. And yeah, just get in touch if you have any questions or wanting to work on a project together as well.
Sounds great. I mean, one of the easy things that we could do for my lovely fellow members here is, if there is a dish from East and Southeast Asia that means something to us, it's probably worth sharing in this month. However, that might be through the newsletter, on our Facebook group, and just kind of encouraging awareness of this campaign. Where I come from in Calcutta, Bengal had huge trade routes with Burma. And actually, I grew up eating cow suey. And in Bengal, lots of families have their own version of cow suey that they cook. And so I was thinking maybe that might be a nice thing to do at the weekend and, share it out in support. So I think that would be a nice thing to do, just if we could all engage our own followers and audiences on the subject and the campaign. Thank you so much, Anna. That was really useful. So that's all the talking I'm going to do, certainly. I suppose we could stop recording now, Julie, if that works. And then it's now a very private session.